everybody. My name
Hi.
is James Stowe. Before I really get talking about who I am and why I'm here, I do want to thank Bill for inviting me. As I understand it, I wasn't the original choice, and I'm very happy to pitch in and talk to you guys tonight. I really love Cartoonist Northwest. I have won a toonie in the past, and every meeting I've ever attended has been full of amazing people. So thank you very much for having me here tonight. A little bit about me. I am a working illustrator. I am also a cartoonist, a graphic designer, an art director, a creative director, a branding designer. Pretty much in my 25-year career, if there was a job where I could get paid to draw or tell people to draw, I did that job. Currently, I very unfortunately, as of yesterday, now only work for myself. As many of us during this time of pandemic, I was downsized yesterday. So that is not, unfortunately, though, what I'm talking about tonight. I'm going to be talking a little bit about color. It's a subject that's very passionate to me. And while I absolutely do not consider myself an expert of color, I have taught it at a high school level, taught color theory. And I try to include color theory in almost everything that I do. So, as Bill was saying, I am also the West rep for the Graphic Artists Guild, which is an organization that both Bill and I belong to. He actually asked me to give this talk at a guild event that is free and open to everyone every Monday at 11 o'clock Pacific time until 1 o'clock Pacific time. It's called the Freelance Fandango. So if you like tonight's talk and would like to continue having talks with creative professionals, I recommend you attend the Freelance Fandango. It's a fantastic group of people, and all our talks are usually really well attended and very informative. I am also the co-founder of the Claw Artist Guild. I co-founded it with Mark Monlux. So I am to blame for that little organization. Let's see, I think that's a bit, I'm also serve on the Tacoma Arts Council. So a lot of the public art you see in the city of Tacoma, I am lucky enough to have been a part of setting all that up. So that is all about me. Let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to talk about tonight. So I would assume most of you are working artists and therefore have the basic understanding of color and how it relates to your work. I'm going to go over all of the basics that you probably have already covered in some kind of class somewhere. I'm going to be talking about primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary colors. I'm going to be talking about warm and cool palettes. I'm going to be talking about complementary colors and how they work together. I'm going to be talking about additive and subtractive color techniques. I'm going to go over some basic color terms. I'm going to talk about the emotional qualities of color and why those emotional qualities should be important to your work. And I'm going to show you examples of my own work that utilize the color subjects that I've talked about tonight. So with all that in mind, I am going to share the other screen that says James Stowe. So everyone should be very familiar with this. That is your standard primary school color wheel. With one slight adjustment, I have added two little white lines for warm and cool colors, but we'll get to that in a little bit. The first thing I want to talk to you guys about is the primaries. So your basic primaries, the primaries we were all taught in school: red, yellow, blue. Red and yellow make blue, blue and red make purple, red and yellow make orange. These are those basic colors. These are the colors that always show up in your crayon box. And the secondary colors, green, orange, and purple. But does anyone know the name of the basic Teteri colors? If I were to pick, let me get my stylus out real fast. If I were to pick, can you see my arrow? If I were to pick this, would everybody know what color that is? Feel free to yell it out.
Violet.
Violet,
Indigo.
that's right, it's part of Roy G. Biv. Absolutely, violet. So Teteri colors. We are talking violet, cyan, magenta, and then the weird ones, vermilion, amber, and my favorite, chartreuse, because so many people use the word chartreuse. I can't think of anyone who, when asked, what is your favorite color? They immediately go, oh, it's chartreuse. But these are just this is your standard getting through basic arts education in primary schools. This is basically what you are taught. And you might be given some basic information about complementary colors, but for the most part, it's your primary colors, your secondary colors, and your Teteri colors. But what if I said there were other Teteri colors?
Tertiary.
Right? And there's even quaternary colors, which might even not even be a term anyone's ever heard before. But here I'm going to show you the alternate Teteris and quaternaries. There you go. So when you mix orange and purple together, you get one of my favorite colors of all time. It's actually my favorite color. It's called russet. If anyone were to ever ask me what's my favorite color, I immediately say russet. Russet tends to show up in almost all of my work. It is a color I'm immediately drawn to. And it is equal parts orange and purple. And then equal parts green and purple, generally called slate. Now, when I say slate, russet, and citron, they might be named other things. As a matter of fact, the arts community generally does not agree on these names at all. And then orange and green in equal colors creates the wonderful color of citron. And then when you mix citron and slate together, you get the quaternary color of olive, also one of my favorite colors. I have two. Some people only have one, I have two. I have two favorite colors. I have a secondary Teteri and a quaternary. Although I never say that. I say red, green. I like red and green. But really, I like russet, and I love olive. And russet and olive together is a beautiful combination. And of course, it's a beautiful combination because they're complementary, but we'll talk about that later. When you mix citron and russet together, you get brown, all the multiple shades of brown. And when you mix slate and russet together, you get plum. Now, if you know about quaternary colors, you can say, wait, but I thought that if you mix citron and russet together, you get plum. Because there is a debate that plum is both an orange purple and a green purple. But I like to consider plum, I like to get all of my information about colors through fruit. And I have never seen an orange plum. So I am of the purple plum type of character. That is me. I'm a purple plum guy. So this is as you can see, some of my lines are really wonky too. Don't worry about my wonky lines. I'm not getting paid for this, so you don't get editing. You just get me putting this all together. So are any of these colors, or even the terms of these colors, let's see, maybe I can see hands. Anybody know how to raise your hand? Has anyone never seen these before? Or at least never heard of, I'm hopefully telling you, now this is all basic information, but hopefully I'm informing you a little bit. So if I turn off everything, we're back to our basic color wheel. So I said I would talk slightly about warm and cool palettes. The warm side of the palette is over here. It's your yellows to your magenta. And generally they are associated with summer months, spring. They are warm, they are inviting. They are used to soften, and they are also used to add vibrancy. And the cool palette is your chartreuse to your purple. Here we have colors that are meant to add depth, add importance. A lot of these cool shades are designed to be very reassuring, but also very staid. And when combined, warm and cool colors can be used in complementary fashion. Magenta and chartreuse work really well together. Purple, yellow, violet and amber, blue and orange, cyan and vermilion, the classic red and green. And they work because they, well, as the name says, they complement each other. I'm not going to dwell too heavily on complementary colors. At this point in most of your careers, I'm pretty sure you absolutely understand, or at least have been told enough repeatedly over and over again, oh, we'll use a complementary color. But the truth is, that is knowledge that's been passed down over and over and over again, because it's practical knowledge. It works. So let me talk a little bit now that I've talked about the basic colors and we have the basic color understanding down. Let's talk about how we use those colors. Now, we primarily use those colors as working artists in two different ways. We either use them in pigment or printing, or through electronic or digital media. Now, when you use them for, I'm going to switch up here a little bit. When you use them in pigments or ink, it's a subtractive method. And what they mean by that is as you add pigment down, you are subtracting the light that is being reflected back to you. So if you add enough color down, you will ultimately get black. All the light will be absorbed into the color that you're putting down. We begin with white in subtractive methods, and we move towards black always. In print, the primary colors are yellow, magenta, and cyan, along with the key color, black. Everyone has heard of CMYK. That is cyan, C, magenta, M, yellow, Y, and key color, or black, which is K, CMYK. And you mix those four colors together in modern printing using rosettes, very little tiny ovals, usually ovals, that overlap each other in order to create overlapping color, allowing you to create reds, blues, purples, greens, all the colors, in theory, all of the colors that you could possibly create. Obviously, there are different printing processes, and part of that different printing process is you run into limited color variants. But for the most part, CMYK is used to create all the colors that you need in modern printing. So that is the subtractive method. Anyone who paints, anyone who creates work for print, primarily uses the subtractive method. The additive method, however, is electronic or digital. Its primary palette is red, blue, and green. And from here, we start with black, an absence of light, and we continue to add light, overlapping light, until we reach white, the most vibrant white we can get, the most vibrant light we can create. So unlike subtractive, which is eliminating light, additive is adding light. So when you begin to add from black different hues of red, green, and blue, you begin to create all the colors that you can create using light. And instead of using rosettes, every single pixel in a CTS or LED display is assigned a very specific value as a percentage of these three primary colors. In this case, black is the default and therefore not added. At 0, a 0 red, a 0 zeroed out red is black. A 0 zeroed out blue is black. A 0 zeroed out green, still black. So when you create a, like say a web-safe hex number, 6-digit hex number, you are assigning those three colors a certain amount from 0 to 255, from black to white, and a certain amount of light. And that's how you create as many colors as possible. Now, digitally, depending on how many pixels you have, the amount of color being able to create is fairly infinite. I say that with reservation in the same way that I said all colors can be created through printing or subtractive method. Obviously, there are limitations in both, but it usually has to do with the device that you're using and not the print method that you are attempting. So there you go. Now we have covered primaries, secondaries, tertiaries, quaternaries, the difference between warm and cool palettes, the importance of our complementary colors, and I've given you a brief overview of the difference between subtractive and additive. So if you are creating work digitally, most of the work I create, I would say 99.5% of the work that I create professionally is digital. But it varies on output. I might be creating it digitally and it might be designed for web or some other digital platform. And therefore, I would create it using an RGB palette. However, if I hope for these to come to print, I would switch over and create a CMYK palette instead. I'm going to open my color. So this is a very simple illustration of CMYK. CMYK is all about percentages. from 0 to 100, whereas RGB, the percentages are now from 0 to 255, which represents the amount of light or vibrancy inside the histogram, which is a whole other conversation I don't have time for tonight, what a histogram is. But if you ever really want to see what the real color build of your artwork is, I would recommend, if you work in Photoshop or another raster type platform, that you begin to experiment with the histogram, because it will really help you with your understanding of how to use color in your own artwork. Understanding how the color creates what you see visually, in my opinion, and I've only been doing this for 25 years, is extremely important. So now let me talk about some basic terms that we all get wrong all the time, or maybe it's just me. Maybe I get it wrong all the time. So here we go. A hue. A hue is a color. Anyone who tries to tell you otherwise doesn't know what they're talking about. Anyone who calls a color by something else, like a tone or a shade or a tint, they are not talking about the basic color. They're talking about a variation of that color. Saturation is the color's intensity, how different it is from neutral gray or pure gray. So when you're talking about something's color saturation, you're saying how different is it from a purely neutral or completely desaturated black and white image. Saturation is not really a matter of light and dark, but really how pale or strong the color is. And then the value of a color represents the brightness of it. The brighter the color, the higher the value. That is often how RGB is explained to people, through its value, the value of red, the value of green, the value of blue. Shade is that color mixed or combined with black. So a shade of green or a shade of yellow is a darker, because it has been mixed with black, shade of that color. A tone of a color is that color mixed with a gray. It is meant to be a desaturated version of that color. So a tone of a color is how gray it is. And a tint of that color is it combined with white or mixed with white. So a shade is darker, a tint is lighter, and a tone is less saturated. So if you think about it along the lines of tone and saturation connect, and value and shade and tint connect, it might help you understand the differences between all of these particular ways to describe color. I get them wrong all the time. I will constantly call things tones when I don't mean tones, or value when I don't mean value. But I have the memory of a goldfish. So that is my my excuse. I don't know what other people's excuses are. So if you've learned anything tonight, you have learned the difference between hue, saturation, value, shade, tone, and tint. Now, what I consider possibly one of the most important aspects of color is what I'm going to talk about next. And what I'm going to talk about next, I'm going to take a little bit of time, because to understand how color influences how we see the world is only truly understood when we talk about its emotional quality. Marketing has known about the emotional quality of color forever. Pardon me while I take a drink. So when you choose a color in your work, it is important for you to understand when you are choosing those colors what the emotional impact you are attempting to communicate to your audience is. And if you do not know that, you might be inadvertently communicating to your audience something you did not intend. If you are only adding color to your work based on, well, that's the way it looks, or I don't know, it just looked nice to me, then you are only creating work that has a surface level of connection with your audience. You can manipulate, and when I say manipulate, I really don't mean in a negative term, because we are, if nothing else, creative communicators. And the idea of communicating things that the audience might not initially be aware of is a very important tool for artists to understand. So with that in mind, I am about to show you the very common emotional connections that are associated with all of the colors in your basic primary color wheel. I'm not going to get into things like russet or olive, despite those being my two favorite colors. I'm just going to do your basic primary, secondary, and tertiary colors. So here we go. And I'm going to go around all of these. Let's start with yellow. Yellow is a very important color. Not only is it a warm color, it is a saturated color. Its value is very high. And emotionally, it is intended to grab attention. If you want someone to notice your work from very far away, add pops of yellow. It will grab somebody every single time. If, as you're walking around or looking at advertisements, moments where advertisers and marketers want to grab you, they will more often grab you with the yellow, amber, or chartreuse color scheme. Because these emotions run in between colors next to them. Yellow is also meant for clarity. It's one of the primary reasons we use yellow to mean caution. Hey, attention, clarity. You need to understand that this is something you have to pay attention to. Hey, the best example of this is stoplight. Green means go. You're safe to go. Red, danger, don't go. But yellow means, hey, you can go, but you got to be really, you really need to pay attention because I'm about to turn red, and red is bad. You're going to get hit. Yellow is intended to be that color that informs us when something is amiss. And if I can get a little metaphysical, I believe probably the reason for that is back in our caveman days, yellow was the color of the light that shone through the canopy. Yellow allowed us to see things that were otherwise shaded. And in the dark, yellow was the eyes of the predator. Yellow is the color of our attention. to understand that as human beings gives you a lot of power in your artwork. So I'm going to go through the warm palette. Let's talk about amber. As you go from bright yellow to a softer, warmer color, you begin to lose its caution. And you begin to associate that color with familial bond and approval. You go from clarity to approval. So amber in the middle of that represents confidence. Oh, I am going to succeed. Adding amber to your work will make people like it more. I know that sounds weird, but it's true. In the same way that orange will add a happy quality to the work that you do. I have just been told that I'm running out of time, so I'm going to go quicker. Even though I could talk about emotional qualities of color for like the next 45 minutes. So let's go with the red, vermilion, magenta area. I'll do it in big blocks. Red is your basic danger color for humanity. We associate red with excitement and energy and enthusiasm and danger, but also passion, right? We love and all the creativity, all the action words are all in the vermilion to magenta range. These are colors that, sure, blood, immediate. When you see blood, danger, right? These are the colors that mean action. Whereas the yellow range, the yellow to orange range, are the colors that represent caution. The vermilion to magenta range are where we have to act. So if you want to create work that is intended to wake people up, the vermilion to magenta range is where you want to do it. Purple to blue with violet in the middle. This runs the gambit. We have often associated purples and violets with wealth or with high stature. Purple was a very difficult color in medieval times in order to create. So therefore, only the most important people were bathed in purple. One of my favorite examples of the use of purple to show importance, and I apologize for any incredibly devout people out there, but Easter is the pet the purple cloth time. They drape the cross with a purple cloth to represent God on earth, to represent the regality of the Savior. But purple, as you get into the blue area, also represents mystery. It represents something to be explored. And as you move into a more blue and away from purple, you begin to get a calm, trust, dependability. A lot of banks use blue. A lot of, certainly the healthcare system uses blue. It's almost all you'll see. Blue, trust us. We'll take care of you. If you want to reassure your audience, show them blue. So let's go with the green, chartreuse, cyan range. Here, you're finding more of that calmness, peace. The green to blue transition goes from trust, dependability to safety. Green is a safety color. But green is also a color associated with health and wealth and optimism and growth and natural and all these things that everyone hopes and dreams to be. So incorporating more greens into your work will help relate.
You guys have a great evening.
But be very careful, because green can also represent some negative emotions. So that is my basic talk about emotion and the emotional qualities of color. And my very last thing I'm going to do, I want to show you some examples of color in my work. I do a weekly, well, I do a daily sketch thing just for myself. I do it with my son. My son's a big Pokemon fan, so he describes Pokemon to me and I redraw them. But part of this project is using a limited palette, primarily 3 colors, and all the shades, tints, tones, values, saturations of those colors possible. So here are just some examples of colors that I have used, palettes I have used that represent some of those emotional qualities that I have tried to add to my work. Here you have mystery, depth, but you also have excitement.
Excuse me, could other
Yes.
people put theirs on mute? I'm hearing too many background noises from other people.
There was definitely somebody eating soup, almost.
Yeah. Just everybody hit mute.
But one of the things I want to show you with my work is how I shade things. I'm going to, let's see if you can see, I'm going to pull my color out here, and I'm also going to pull my, my gradient out here. So what I usually do for shading is I pick the colors that already exist in the piece, and I create a very simple gradient of those colors in order to create a shadow, a base color. In order to really, instead of using straight black, I always build my shadows and my highlights out of shades and tints out of those colors. Often, Mark reminds me or tells me that I am far away from the colors actually described once I do that, but that is by intention, because I am trying to tell stories with color that you might not otherwise notice. Like here, I really wanted to create kind of a threatening character. So I created these purples to represent mystery, and the magentas to represent, here, let's go back, energy and mystery and depth. And then for the eyes, I picked a yellow color, caution. So in drawing this, I really paid attention to the colors I was using in order to communicate what I was trying to communicate. So I didn't just pick blue and pink, which is what my son told me it should be. I really tried to understand how that blue and pink would tell a story. And a lot of that has to do with emotional qualities. So I know I'm running right up to near the end of my time. So I am willing to take some questions. And again, I say that by telling you guys, again, I do not consider myself an expert on color. So if you have a very specific color question that would require a PhD of color, that is not the question for me. Does anyone have any questions?
I've got a question.
Sure.
Stowe, you've been showing us basically icon uses of the images, just the image itself. Can you show us one of your compositions where you have a figure that's warm in the background.
Oh, in a background?
Yeah, a whole composite of how you manage
see.
color.
Let's see what I got.
I'm sure you might have, just pick any
Oh,
panel.
here. You know what? I'm going to do some Lakewood Playhouse posters. No, where's the final version of that? As you can see, I've got like 4 or 5 versions of every final. So here you go. This is again a very limited palette. And when I say limited palette, I really strive to try to create a palette, and that includes shades, tones, and tints of only 3 colors. In this case, my 3 primary colors are blue, a magenta shaded red, and green. Now, this was a Christmas piece, so it very specifically had to invoke Christmas. But in the same respect, I also wanted to invoke a bit of chaos. So in places where there was a character who was meant to be endearing in the play, like this character right here, or the Mother Mary, I made sure that they were placed under on blue in order to reinforce the calmness of them. Whereas all the characters that were designed to be dangerous, disruptive, I put on a red background. And I included a lot of yellow to them. This character, which is half red and half blue, as you can see, is trying to save the play, but also creating chaos. So they are placed right in between the red and the blue. All this is meant to be very subtle. The object here is not to beat people over the head with what you're trying to tell them. It's just meant to reinforce the storytelling you're already doing through your drawing. Let's see. There's some in the chat. I don't know if there's any questions. Are the emotional impact in any way consistent across other cultures? That is a fine question. I'm not sure I have the exact right answer to that. I will say that there are certainly cultural differences between how we accept color. But they tend to be more on the fringe range of things. We as a species tend to understand the base colors in an almost universal way. But there are certainly cultural impact, like cultural events that take place in other cultures that certainly change how important one color is to another. For example, purple is regal in Western cultures, mostly because of the European kings and queen influence. That is not something that translates across every culture. That is very unique to Europeans. Anybody else have a question?
I have a question.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Hang on. I'll turn my video on so you can see what I look like. Okay. So you brought up the gradient for shading and shadows. So you pick your 2 contrasting colors and you make the gradient between them. Then do you pick from that gradient to pick the color of the shadows? Is that how you use the gradient?
No, I put the gradient straight on. What I usually do is I pick a light source and I pick the lighter tint color, like the one that's lighter, to be closer to the light source that I've already chosen. Here, let me see if this is a good example, I think, right here. So this guy, you can see the light source is right about here. So the gradients is an orange to green gradient. So I chose the orange tint to be in the back, so that the green up here would just be a slight subtle effect, whereas as you get back farther, let's see if I can't actually show you the, it doesn't, it's not behaving in the fact that it's actually showing me the, how do I get the, shoot. Now see, that is the difference. I just switched it. I'm gonna switch it back. So as you can see, there was because this particular gradient is a switch between cool and warm, I wanted the cool to be the one closer to the light source. But usually it's just, for me, it's a easy way for me to determine light source. And let's see if I can find one that's a little darker or has a bit more of a transition. Let's see, what about this guy? So this one, yep, this is a good one. So this went from a really vibrant, really saturated magenta to a cool blue. And in the middle, I didn't like how that transition was working. So what I did instead was I put a very light tint of magenta in the middle to soften the transition between those two colors. So on one side, as you can see here, if you can see where my my cursor is, this is the top of that gradient. And you can see it almost disappears into the color that I used it. Whereas as you get deeper down, that blue really creates this beautiful purple to help with the whole depth and mystery of this particular character. And I know I'm getting way too into the whole emotional quality thing to it, but the idea that you can add this subconscious messaging to your work that an audience member might not even realize they're being influenced by, to me is one of the most interesting parts of doing this kind of work. If you're doing work for print and web, why do you start in CMYK and then convert to RGB and vice versa? Generally, generally when I'm working, now these are all CMYK because ultimately I'm going to be printing them. But what I would recommend, if you're working digital, try to work in RGB and then convert to CMYK. I personally am a lot more comfortable using the CMYK sliders than I am the RGB sliders. So I tend to work in CMYK even if I am not outputting in CMYK. And especially in, I work in Illustrator, I'm a vector artist. So you can choose what you want to output, even though if I'm working in a CMYK workspace, but I can output in RGB. Now there's going to be some color change, and I would be very wary and careful of that color change. It's definitely more evident when you switch from RGB to CMYK. RGB is very vibrant, just by nature, because it's created out of light. So when you print, you're not going to get that vibrancy. So if you're working in RGB and you're expecting to print it, you better shift to CMYK first, just to be sure that everything is going to print correctly for you. I hope that was helpful. I hope that answered that question. Does anybody else have any other questions? And again, hopefully this wasn't just your, oh, well, he just went over everything I digested in color theory class 15 years ago. Like what? Hopefully I give you a little bit more information than that. I always like to, I like to go back every once in a while and just revisit color theory to remember all the stuff, because it is one of the most important pieces of doing this kind of work. The understanding why you use color and using color intentionally instead of using color haphazardly it really elevates your work. And the whole reason I'm here having this conversation with you guys is because Bill and I had a conversation, was it this week or last week? Where I suggested he limit his palette because he was creating a palette that was more observational. And I was trying to convince him that it would be better and more impactful for his work if he created an intentional palette and then limited that palette to make more creative decisions. I don't know whether he did that or not. I'm curious. Now I'm going to ask a question. Bill, did you do that? I'm putting you on the spot. Are you even still here?
Yeah, I left the one that you were mentioning that looked okay as is. I have to confess that I probably could redo the other one, which was the one you were complaining about. But...
No. You misunderstand me. I never complain. I helpfully critique.
Uh-huh. No,
so do you understand now that I have done this talk why it is important to choose your color wisely and use it intentionally? Don't be a slave of color. Use color as a tool. So now all of you hopefully will, after this discussion, will go look at old artwork and be like, oh, if only change this and this and this, and use this color range, and oh, I can't believe I was unintentionally communicating this emotional quality with this piece, and I didn't really intend to do that. Like, for example, wait, let me get back to, I'm going to stop sharing at this point. I'm gonna turn my video off. So on Donna's background, I'm so glad that she brought up her t-shirt because it's bright yellow and I love it. It's so cautionary. It demands attention. I don't know whether she did that intentionally or not, but I love it. You're muted. I cannot hear you.
There we go. No, I did that intentionally because, you know, it's bright. It's Egypt. It's sunny.
Yeah,
it's
great.
attractive.
I love it.
Yeah. I wanted to make a mention about your saying that the use of red, and this might be getting into a delicate area here, but when you say that red is dangerous because it's blood, I don't think that's why it's dangerous for women.
Well,
I'm being delicate.
right,
there are a lot of women like
reason,
red.
The same reason it's dangerous for women is the same reason that men find it dangerous as well, I think. There's definitely that taboo aspect of it.
Not red is a lot of women. Red is their favorite color. It's beautiful. It's comforting, because for women, red is part of our everyday life.
Sure.
It's just like you were saying, different cultures, and that would include within the species. So that's always something to think about. A lot of women
say
love
that red is also the color of love and passion. Don't get me wrong.
Exactly, and that's why you know, they say women love pink, although young men are again claiming hot pinks.
Yes, and all the power to them. I
well,
think
and up until 1940,
more men should wear bright pink. It's an energetic and wonderful color.
Well, when it first came out, it was expensive.
That's true. Very true.
And pink belonged to men, and women had blue because it's calm. Excuse me. And then it swapped about the 1940s, and nobody knows why.
Oh, there's a theory behind that.
Oh, okay.
Pink was being used in the military as a male color, but during the 50s, Lady Bird Johnson, the president's wife, started wearing pink dresses, and that produced a whole shift over.
Yeah, because pink was originally pink when it was printed. It was an expensive color, and so whenever men wanted to show off, they were wearing pink. And if you look at young men again, or everybody's wearing pink now because, of course, it's gorgeous.
Yellow in Japanese culture was so important that it was considered to be the emperor's color. And if the emperor sent you a yellow scarf, it meant that since that color belonged only to him, you couldn't be in possession of it. And it was basically a silent message saying, you gotta go do seppuku in the backyard.
Mhm. Well, again, if you look at some of the colors, though, very often, as with purple, they were expensive.
Yep.
I'm sorry. I'm going to mute because I've got a cough. I'm sorry.
Should we give this meeting back to Bill so that he can?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
And again,
well,
thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Stowe. It's great to everything.
Thank you.
I always find it, even if it's stuff that I know about, already know, I always find it very informative when it's all grouped together in a easy to digest way to have a refresher.
Oh, great.